This is Neena Perez, and this is Straight Talk, no sugar added. Thank you so much for watching. This show was created to discuss life topics and hopefully challenge and transform your thinking. Today, I am super excited because these are the kind of conversations I love to have. And I have E.J. Sweeney here with me. He is a skeptical by nature. He needs to see to believe, hard evidence, solid logic, compelling arguments. This is who this guy is, and that's why I'm glad he is here. So this is what he believes in. And when it comes to the Christian faith, he has seen how compelling the evidence is. And as a result, he is now an ordained Lutheran pastor. And EJ received his BA from Trinity College and his MDiv from Yale University as summa cum laude. And he is the author of Raising Jesus. And this book is so good. You got to pick it up. So I am really excited about getting into this conversation with EJ. So EJ, thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me. This is a great honor to be here and a
Thank
privilege to
you.
be with you.
Oh, I am excited because I know we're going to have a great conversation.
Absolutely.
So the way we want to start this is I want you to just give us a little bit about who you are, just so the audience knows you a little bit better.
So I grew up in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and my life's ambition back when I was a kid was to replace Thurman Munson as catcher for the Yankees. So I don't know, that dates me a little bit, but I don't know if people know who Thurman Munson was. But when I was growing up as a kid, my God was baseball, essentially. I grew up Catholic. I was very nominal Catholic. I went to church kind of because I was afraid of going to hell, didn't want to go to hell. But mostly I was superstitious. I thought if I went to church, then God would make my dreams to play Major League Baseball work out. I went to college, as you said, at Trinity in Hartford. And the first semester there, I took this course in the book of Job. I don't know why I took that course, probably because I figured it was a religion class. It's going to be easy. It will kind of pad my schedule. It wasn't easy at all. Not only was it one of the hardest classes I took academically, but it put my life to the test. It asked, for people who've read the book of Job, you know, it's all about suffering and how could God, a loving God, allow suffering? That threw my world into a tailspin. I never really asked that question seriously before. And so it launched me on this, what I call my religious quest, a quest to kind of answer those ultimate questions about life. Like, what's the meaning of life? Is there a God? What happens when you die? And so I determined at that point, I was kind of a bizarre college student because all my other friends were out partying, but I determined at that point that I was going to figure the answer to these questions out and stake my life on that. Whatever I found out, whatever the truth was, whether it was atheism or another religion, I would follow that. So to make a long story short, I eventually determined there had to be something out there, some kind of God. And at the time, Trinity had a great philosophy and religion program, world religions program. So I studied the other major world religions, and I loved Buddhism, I loved Islam, and my favorite was Taoism. And I'd be a Taoist today if it was simply a matter of preference. What happened was, again, kind of to shorten the whole story, is I looked at Christianity and I looked at the evidence for the resurrection, and I really wanted to dismiss it. I did not want Christianity to be true. It was too hard. You're like, love your enemy. And then you have to believe things like the Trinity. How do you make sense of God being three persons, but one God? But what confronted me, what I was stuck with, was the fact that it was harder not to believe Jesus rose from the dead, purely based on the evidence, than to believe he rose from the dead. And once I kind of resolved that and accepted that, I was like C.S. Lewis, and he calls himself the most reluctant convert in all of Britain. Once I accepted that it was true, then I could put my trust in Christ and had a real personal encounter that transformed my life. That, you know, I can't even put in words what that has meant to me and to my life. It truly saved me on so many levels.
Right. So, but the thing is like you said you like raised Catholic, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So isn't that funny that you were already like dismissing the Trinity, right?
Yeah.
So
Because it didn't make sense, because it wasn't logical. Like Islam is logical, one God, right? A singular God.
Yes.
To believe that God is somehow three persons yet one, you know, in a perfect unity of a Godhead of one, to me was, you know, logically absurd. And for me, it was all about the evidence, the logic, what's most reasonable.
Right. And that's not easy even to a Christian to explain.
Right.
You know, it's still a very difficult thing to explain when you're trying to explain the three Godheads in one. And I think that that's why the more modern Christians are actually kind of dismissing that. And they're just doing it like it's just one God, and Jesus is like his son, but he's not God.
Right.
You know, that's like a at least for me, a newer thing I've been hearing.
Yeah.
from more
But
modern Christianity. Mhm.
one of the things that I found is when the things that seem most absurd to me, which were the Trinity, the atonement, why Jesus has to die on the cross,
Right.
and the incarnation, how he can be fully human, fully divine. I don't have time to explain these right now, but
Right.
basically what I found is that there was a deeper logic. There was a kind of what I call a hyper logic that actually makes it so that you can't really have a God of love unless God is a Trinity. God can't really love sinful human beings, free and fallen human beings, unless he's willing to die on a cross for us.
Right.
God has to become a human being. Otherwise, he's completely detached and doesn't really love us. He's not willing to kind of enter into our pain, our suffering. So those three doctrines actually make a whole lot of sense. In fact, they're logically necessary for there to be a God, especially a God who really loves us.
Was that very difficult for you to even accept to begin with? I mean, I know it's one thing to, like, to take the class, and I'm sure that it was challenging.
Right.
Um, but then to actually accept it is another thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're reading it and you're like, okay, because I'll say this.
Yeah.
For a lot of us who do believe, we come to the faith with emotions,
Right.
right? You're coming, at least it sounds to me like you're coming at it in a logical sense, right?
Yes. Yep.
So and so that must have been hard for you if you're not having, at least let me just talk for myself. I came to it more of an emotional state. I was broken
Right.
and I needed a savior, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And so that's how I attached, I found Jesus in my life, and then I became more logical about it.
Right.
For you, you're coming at it already with an education piece or a logical piece, right? Do
Yes.
you feel like, um do you ever struggle with the emotion of it, or do you ever struggle with people who are only emotional about Christ, or how do you deal with that?
So I'm doubting Thomas. I need to see to believe.
Okay.
And oftentimes when I tell my story, like when I go through what I just did, or in greater depth, how that whole process unfolded, I feel like it doesn't compare to, like, your story is incredibly powerful. I was overwhelmed reading your book. And I've
Oh, thank
heard
you.
those kinds of stories of how Jesus comes into somebody's life and he transforms it. I've heard, I know people who have had that gift of faith, and ultimately it is a gift. It's a gift of the Holy Spirit. It's grace, who had that gift their whole life. They just never questioned God. They knew Jesus personally from the very first moment they were aware of anything. And I felt not jealous, but just felt like my story was inadequate compared
Mm,
to theirs. Because mine essentially was, I was going to follow the evidence, follow the evidence and the reason, the logic to where the truth led. So I felt oftentimes that those other stories are much more powerful and compelling. I think as a skeptic, and I think I can speak for people who are skeptical, the problem with a personal experience is that it's subjective. You know it's true. You know it's true
right.
for yourself. But as a skeptical person watching you and hearing you say, believe in Jesus because it's incredible. I've had this personal encounter with him. He's real. You know, I would think, if I didn't know it was true, that, well, you just had a lot of caffeine. And so you're
Right.
mistaking the experience of Jesus for the euphoria you feel when you have a lot of caffeine.
Right.
So skeptics need some kind of like objective ground before they can take that leap. That leap is necessary. Like any person who is going to believe in Jesus, it's ultimately about a personal encounter with him, a relationship with him. And I've had that experience, but I wouldn't trust it. And I think that's the skeptical position,
Okay.
is I wouldn't trust it unless I saw the evidence. It's
Right.
like Thomas, who gets a
Yeah.
bad rap. How would you like to have your name go down in history as doubting
Right.
Thomas?
Right.
But when he,
I think it
you
was
know,
necessary. I think his story is necessary.
it is, and
Yeah.
what's amazing to me, what kind of gives me heart as a skeptic, is that in John 20, when it's talking about Thomas and his doubt, literally what he says in the Greek is, unless I take my fist and
Hmm.
thrust it up Jesus' side, the wound that I
Hmm.
saw in his side when he was crucified and died, I won't believe in him. And that challenge, essentially, Thomas wouldn't say something like that, something that graphic, that grotesque, unless he didn't believe Jesus was risen. He
Right.
was basically challenging God to prove himself to him. And when Jesus comes, Jesus doesn't say, Thomas, you bonehead, what's wrong with you? How could you question me this way? He opens his side and says, Thomas, go ahead. Thrust it,
Mm.
literally in the Greek again, thrust your fist right up my side if you want to. Now, Thomas doesn't need to at that point. He falls on his knees and confesses. And that this is the key. In John 20:28, Thomas confesses Jesus, my Lord and my God. There is no other person in all the Gospels who understands who Jesus is more than Thomas. It's his doubt that led him to penetrate to the truest identity of who Jesus is and to confess that in faith.
Right.
And so I think that gives heart, I think, to all skeptics in the sense that, asking those tough questions, if you're sincere, asking those tough questions, God will prove himself to you. And then eventually you'll be able to take that leap of faith. A skeptical person needs to have just a very small leap in order to trust, to have that personal encounter. But God will get you to that point. If he did that for Thomas, he's going to do that for anybody else. But that doesn't mean everybody comes to faith that way. In fact, most people I meet come more, maybe not as dramatic or powerful as your story, but in those moments of life where you realize you need a savior, that you can't do it all on your own. Or just kind of the grace of having grown up in a solid Christian family, or just having that awareness, that connection to God right from the beginning, and knowing Jesus intimately from the first moments that you were aware of him.
It's funny, and when I was listening to you say, sometimes you get, for lack of a better term, jealous of the emotional experience, whatever. And
Right.
I actually started to feel that way about apologetics, or people who are apologists, right? Because coming at it with just emotion also is not good, because you don't think things through, and you're not, and a lot of times we take the word of the Lord as secondary to the emotion, and that can also be very scary, because I'm starting to get that now, because I was super hyper charismatic, and so I'm now finding balance. And in that journey of finding balance, it was very difficult for me to now look at the word and say, okay, what is the word actually saying? How to exegete this word properly?
Right.
And, instead of putting myself into the story, but what is the story? What is God saying through the story?
Yeah.
I also never learned, I've been a Christian for like 15 years or almost 20 years. And like the way Jesus is weaved even through the Old Testament, right? Like all the stories that are weaving with, and it's like screaming Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But because we want to take it and make it applicable, we don't see it with Jesus in it. We see it with us in it.
Right.
So it's funny, right? How you can go both ways. You can either be so skeptical that now nothing can pull you through this way, right? Or you can be so charismatic that you don't want to think logically.
Right. And I think, God gave us a mind and a heart. We're emotive and rational beings, creatures. So there's a way in which both are integral to our relationship with Christ, and both have to be engaged. And I think the good news that our culture demeans, is that the rational side can be just as compelling as that emotive side. I would argue that the most reasonable worldview is the Christian worldview. It's the one that corresponds best to reality, to what we experience in the world. So I think both can be completely engaged, and really for a healthy Christian life, you have to have both. So for me, coming at it intellectually, I did have to at some point have that personal encounter and some of those experiences for it to be real. If I stopped at the intellectual, I would know it in my head, but I wouldn't know him. And it's no good to know it in your head if you don't really know him. So for those who kind of get there without having to go through all that, I guess, I respect that. And in some ways I'm jealous of it, and it's great. And what I've been amazed at is, because I do a lot of talks or teaching with people who have been Christian for a long time and came that way, came more emotively or through that gift or grace of faith. But they love apologetics. They eat like you, they eat it up. It kind of reassures them that this is credible. So what they had as a subjective experience, they can see this is objectively true. This is the truest thing in the universe, about the universe. And that encourages them, kind of sets them on fire. It creates a more passionate discipleship. So people who are already deeply faithful actually are ignited to a greater and bolder faith, and then can encounter those who are skeptical in the world and bring it to them.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, isn't it? When you can take both and empower people that way. Now, did you struggle with you said you kind of encountered that yourself a little bit, having more of an emotional connection with God at a certain level. Now, was that something you were seeking, or something that just kind of happened and you recognized that's what was happening?
That's a good question. It's a long time ago. I remember the moment where I kind of came to that. It was actually a holy crap moment, because again, I didn't want Christianity to be true. But I'm like, okay, this is true. Now what? And it was very natural, because at that point, I guess I said, all right, Jesus, you're really God. I'm going to start praying to you. And I think maybe perhaps the grace of having grown up Catholic, even though nominally, was that I had things that I knew I could do in order to encounter him in prayer. Um, Growing up Catholic, I did not ever read the Bible
Yeah,
before.
me neither.
So that was a first, and that was bizarre at first. I mean, one of the great blessings I think was as I started reading the Gospels, it wasn't what I expected, and I had to start reading commentaries and understand the context, which then unlocked what they're really saying, which is so much more amazing than the surface level. When you start to get at what is actually going on in them. What happened for me, this is the way I describe my experiential side, is I fell in love with Jesus. It just became so obvious that the beauty of who he is. I mean, the most beautiful thing in the universe is the cross. When you think about what God has done on the cross for us, and when you look at his life, like one of my favorite passages is the leper who comes up to him and says, if you want to, you can heal me. There's no doubt that he's God and can do this, but he doubts whether Jesus will actually want to. And then again, the Greek in there is talking about he's moved with the deepest emotions, Jesus is. And then, he can heal at a distance. He can just say, yeah, be healed, go away. And lepers in that day were marginalized. They were social outcasts. Nobody wanted to be near, kind of like Corona. You want to be near somebody who had it because you could get it. That was the thinking back then. But Jesus reaches out and touches him, which would have meant far more even than the physical healing. That he hadn't been touched in years ever since he had this disease. And Jesus touches him and says, be healed. And in that moment, he's healed. In that moment, he is free from that disease. But more importantly, he knows that this person who he acknowledged as God, who could do this, loves him and did this tender, gracious, kind of intimate act for him of in the process of healing him, meeting his deepest need, which was to know God's love.
Yeah, so he healed his soul and he healed his
Yeah.
body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I
so
like the way you
good.
feel the soul. Yes. Yeah.
So good. So do you find yourself, I mean, I know you're a Lutheran pastor now.
Yes.
What made you not go back to Catholicism, right? Because that's where you grew up, right? Isn't that, I mean, I know it's probably a tough question and a loaded question, so you could just simplify a little bit if you can. But I just was wondering because I know that for me, I was Catholic as well,
Right.
and I never opened the Bible either. And I became charismatic because that's kind of where I landed when I found the Lord,
Right.
so that's just where I was. And I never really thought about going back to Catholicism. Nothing against Catholics. Most of my
Right.
family is Catholic. But I just never went back because I didn't feel that intimate connection. Did you just
Yeah.
find that it just went well with your thought process, being a Lutheran? Or?
So the reason I'm a Lutheran pastor is because of my wife. Because
Okay.
when
Well,
I
we love
came,
your wife, so that's
well,
fine.
yes,
It's all
she's
fine.
wonderful. She's standing right there too. So if I go out of the picture, that's because I'm no longer on this earth. But for saying so, but it's what happened for me was as a Catholic, I had a great Catholic experience, and especially when I kind of came through that conversion moment. The people in my circles did talk about a personal relationship with Christ. They talked
Oh,
about the
great.
unconditional love of God, especially some of the Catholics, the priests I was reading. They kind of made sense of things in a way that was very compelling to me. So as a Catholic, naturally, a single young man in college as a Catholic, you start to think about the priesthood. And a lot of people, that's a long story, vocation story. But the reason I eventually became a Lutheran wasn't because I didn't find Christ in the Catholic Church. It was because I felt this calling to ordained ministry, and being called to marriage also did allow me to do that. I think that, I mean, for me, I consider myself first and foremost Christian, and I think there are all kinds of amazing expressions of Christianity throughout the different denominations and churches. The most important thing is that relationship with Christ. But I think while there are problems in each church, each denomination, Christ is alive in all of them. And as I've had a chance, because I've gone through other denominations, I've done some of the talking and speaking, it's amazing how dynamic and alive he is in his church, in so many people, and especially younger people who are so passionately committed. There may not be as many as there used to be years ago,
Yeah.
but the depth of their faith, their willingness to commit their lives to him is stunning. And I found that in the Catholic Church, I found that in Lutheran Church, evangelical churches, non-denominational churches, Pentecostal churches,
That's beautiful.
charismatics. So
That's beautiful. That's a
it's
beautiful thing if you can
it's
find
hopeful.
God in
Yeah. Yeah.
in so many
Yeah.
different, denominations, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I think that I think the core of our faith is what needs to align,
Right.
the Trinity, the sacrifice of the Lord on the cross. Those
Yeah.
things have to be, I think, you please correct me if I'm wrong, but they have to be the core of
Right.
your belief,
Right.
So it confuses me a little bit when somebody tells me they're a Christian but don't believe that Christ is, God or something. That just
Yes.
it kind of throws me off a little bit,
Right.
So I've also spoken to people, and I'm sure you've probably gone through this, about morals, because a lot of people who I know, are atheists, will say
Right.
to me, you don't need to be a Christian to have morals.
Right.
And I guess that's true. But then I always ask, well, then where do you get your morals from?
Right.
And their answer, of course, is my parents and society and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. So, and I'm not an apologist. I don't know how to really do this, as far as, having an argument against these kind of things. But do you believe that God is the center of the of morals, of morality, or,
Yeah.
or do you believe that we can be just taught morals and then we're good?
Well, first, one step back, when you were talking about the essence of the faith, I think I heard a sermon years ago which nailed it, is the ultimate question, the question you're going to be asked when you face God is, do you love Jesus? Because he's God. And we're created for love. We're not created to be good. And that's the problem people get confused with when they don't really understand Christianity from inside or out, is that they think it's about being a good person,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
obviously it's about a relationship, and it transforms you, it makes you good, but that's not what it's about. But the reason why you desire to be good, and actually you can't really be good unless you're doing it because you want to. If you're just being good to somebody because you want something in return, or you fear some kind of condemnation, that's not really good.
Right.
It's only good when you really want their best, when you truly love them. And only Christ can create that in us, and that's ultimately why we've been created. To be with him in eternity, out of desire. That's why we have free will. We can
Hmm.
reject it eternally, but it's ultimately about our accepting him and his love, desiring that above all else. So when you ask the questions about morality, and there are plenty of apologists who are far better than me talk, this is not my area of expertise. I recommend reading Timothy Keller. Making Sense of God is a great book when it comes to this. But it all relates, because if there is no God, there's no point, there's no meaning. The most rational thing to do, in a sense, is to basically give up on life. But Nietzsche had this right, nihilism. Nietzsche, he didn't do it himself, but he basically said, if you really believe there's no God, there's no point, there's no meaning, then you should cease living. I mean, there's no
Existing.
reason to
Yeah.
live.
Hmm.
But the next most rational thing is will to power. That's kind of what he is famous for, and which people like Hitler took to an extreme. So basically, survival of the fittest. Do what is best for you, because if there's no real absolute, if the universe really isn't about love, then it can be all about you. In fact,
Right.
that's the most rational thing.
Most
There
of the
is
time, it
nothing
is all
else.
about us anyway.
Yes, yes, that's
We
our
are the
fundamental.
center of the
Yes,
universe.
that's our fundamental problem, our sin. But so it's like you said, there are secular humanists who are some of the most heroically loving people on the face of the earth. And so you don't have to be a Christian to be a good moral person. However,
That's
there's
good.
a lot of statistical evidence. There's Rodney Stark is a sociologist who wrote a book called America's Blessing, and he showed that people who take their faith seriously, in a statistically significant way, live much more moral lives, give more to charities, are more ethical, honest, so forth. So there is a relationship, a correlation. There should be anyway. I mean, for a
Hmm.
Christian, if
Hmm.
you trust in Christ, it should transform you. You should look more like him every single day. Not that happens overnight, but that should be what is happening to you, transformed by his grace. So there is a relationship between the two. So when people in our culture want to say, you don't have to believe in God to be good, well, that's true, but the chances of you being good are significantly increased
Yeah.
if you do believe in
Yeah.
God. And what I find interesting is when I talk to people who are atheists, they talk about practical atheism, which is believers who don't live their faith. So,
Okay.
like the joke about where's the most dangerous place in America? It's a Sunday morning in the church parking lot when everybody's trying to leave and run each other over. There are a lot of Christians who don't live their faith, who are hypocrites, but there's also a lot of atheists in a good way who are hypocritical. That they're basically practical theists, because if they followed the logic of what they believe, they would cease to live, or they would,
Right.
exercise the will to power. And yet they're very good people. Like they're very kind and compassionate people. They live as if there is a God. They live their lives if there is some kind of deeper meaning, deeper point. So they tell you there's no God, you die and that's it. You rot in the ground. But in reality, they're living as if there is so much more than the
There's
material
meaning.
universe. Right.
Yeah. So I wanted to have you, there's something you said in our conversation on the phone that really just stuck with me. And we were talking about the skeptical mind, and
Right.
how hard that must be to always have the skeptical mind. And so
Yeah.
if something's in front of you that that may be more emotionally engaging from God, that you're probably like,
Right. Yes.
so there's something you said that really touched me, which was, I'm skeptical but not fragile.
Right.
And I really, really love that, because it gave me hope that, people who are solid atheists or people who are solid skeptics can still find their way to the Lord, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
So what do you say to people that are skeptical, maybe atheist, or they're just, maybe they're agnostic, but what do you say to someone like that about fragility, right? Like, maybe they
Yeah.
don't need to be so fragile. Not everything we say is to offend them.
Right.
Sometimes we're just really trying to maybe open a dialogue, or have gain some knowledge from them, and they can maybe gain some knowledge from us.
Right.
So what can you say to someone like that?
So, if I do articulate that skeptical perspective, I think I do, because as I talk to people, I think that where I'm coming from is where many of them are coming from, that needing to see to believe. I'm constantly asking questions. I will still go, my allegiance ultimately is to the truth, whatever that
Mhm.
truth
That's
is. And I
good.
firmly believe Jesus is the truth. And the reason why I don't think I'm fragile anymore, even though I continually ask questions, I continually pursue not only my own doubts, but challenges other people raise, or questions that I don't have an answer for. But I feel like I've kind of unearthed all the major challenges at this point. There's nothing really new that comes at me. And every time I pursue something that is kind of a nuance to a question, they're not really big things that are challenges now, they're kind of nuances. I find even more evidence that it's true. So the only thing
Mm,
that questioning does for me is bring me to a deeper level of confidence that it's true. And what I would challenge people who are skeptical is to do that if you're sincere. The problem, and this is my big frustration, is that doubt is in vogue in our culture right now, but it's not a healthy doubt. It's not a
right.
skepticism which says, I really want to know the truth and I will do whatever it takes, and then I'll stake my life on it. What it says is, I want to live my life the way I'm living it. I want to be the captain of my soul. So I'm going to use these doubts and questions to kind of keep people off my back. So I'll tell people that I can't believe in a God who allows suffering. And that's a perfectly legitimate question. Like I said, it launched my religious quest. And there's great answers to it. But they don't really want to know the answer. What they
Right.
want to do is they want the person who of faith is trying to share their faith with them to kind of back off. There's a great story about a woman who was invited to a Bible study that was all about the resurrection, evidence for the resurrection. So her friend invites her to the Bible study. She goes through it. At the end of the Bible study, the friend says, what do you think of the evidence? She's like, oh, I'm convinced he rose from the dead. He's the Son of God. So her friend rhetorically basically asks her, so you want to become a Christian now? And she says, oh, no, I don't want to do that. That would mean I'd have to change my life. And I think that's where, I mean, she was
That's
honest about
real.
it.
That's
But,
real.
but
Yeah.
most people, and I don't think they're being dishonest with you. I think
Right.
they're kind of fooling themselves. They're not being
Yeah.
honest with themselves. Is that they really don't want it to be true. So they're using doubt. They're throwing the questions out there to kind of keep God at arm's length.
Yeah.
That's my biggest frustration. And so, to me, it's so obvious that it's true. And if you give it a chance, you'll see it, and you'll have my experience that the more you dive in, the more the answers, it makes you more and more certain, almost to the point where, and you never get 100% certainty until you see God face to
Right.
face, but you're just like so sure. So I continue to question, but in fact, even like they say, when I'm in church and I see people having emotive experiences, every once in a while, I'll have in the back of my head, is this real? Are they really experiencing Jesus? Is he real? And then, I quickly go back to all the stuff that I've discovered. And I
Right.
think anybody who is skeptical will be able to have that groundwork that will get them to trust that the experiential is real. It's not a figment of their imagination. It's the most true thing about the universe, the realest thing they can experience, more real than the air that they breathe.
Yeah. And I mean, we are also told to test the spirit, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
that's also our responsibility. You can't just
right,
you believe everything also, but that's really great. So the reason I wanted to kind of close out with that is because I want people who are skeptical and are going through a challenge of believing is to not be fragile, to
right,
be skeptical. It's okay. It's actually great, like
right.
to be skeptical because
Yeah,
you should be discerning, you should be testing the spirit, you should be doing those things, but don't be fragile when truth comes, right? Truth
right,
doesn't care about our feelings.
right,
Truth is just truth.
right.
Right. And so we at least that's the way I try to look at life. Like truth
Yeah,
is truth, whether I like it or not is irrelevant. Right. It's
yes,
just truth.
right.
So I am very grateful to you for taking the time to come on here and discuss
I'm
this with
so
me
happy. Thank you.
because this was
Yes,
super fun for me. This was super
me as
fun.
well.
So I wanted to kind of uh, make sure that I encourage everyone to pick up your book. So again, it's Raising Jesus and it's EJ Sweeney. I'm going to have all of his info on the video, but I would like it if you can to just quickly let us know where we can find you, follow you, buy the book, things like that.
So the book can be found on Amazon and my website, raisingjesus.com, where I do a blog, usually a weekly blog, and address questions of faith. And if people have questions, their own questions, I encourage them to submit them to me because I love to answer them in the subsequent
Oh,
weeks'
that's great.
blogs. And to just take heart that, if you are a skeptic, look at Thomas. Jesus made himself completely available to Thomas's questions and doubts, and will do that for you as well if you're sincere. Obviously, Thomas wanted to see
Right.
Jesus alive from the dead. He just
Right.
didn't think it was true. And if you have that desire or that openness to it being true, he will come through for you. So
Yeah,
if
you
I can
sure
do
will.
anything to help with that, raisingjesus.com, any questions you have, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. And also follow him on YouTube, guys, because I
Yes.
do. And you do great segments. They're like right to the point. You answer the question and it's really informative. So make sure you guys
Thank you.
catch that. And EJ, thank you so much for
Thank you so
being on
much,
here
Neena.
with me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Make sure you click below because there's a lot of great content and conversation coming your way. So thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time.